When people find out what I do for a job, they very often ask me, what's that like? If you have young people in your life making choices about GCSEs or A-levels, whether to go to college, perhaps they're interested in fashion and they're wondering whether or not to study textiles, it's an awful lot to think about. And it's only now that I'm, I suppose, advising my own 13-year-old, because she's coming up to choosing GCSEs and she's thinking about whether or not to do textiles. I've realised how important it is for young people when they're thinking through what they're going to choose to study, how that actual job that they will end up going into will affect their daily lifestyle. The first great thing about being a wedding dress designer, dressmaker, and particularly making custom dresses is that it never, ever gets boring. I've done this for over 20 years and I found that every bride is different, every dress is different, every fabric is different. So if the young person you're talking to, or you yourself, if you're thinking about a career in fashion or in bridal, if you dread being bored and you love the challenge of things being different every day and every scenario, every customer being so different, then bespoke might be a really good option for you. The second thing which has really struck me about the job I do is the fact that you are always, always learning. I never really appreciated this in the job that I did before I was a bespoke dressmaker. I worked in retail. I was a retail manager for a while and then an area manager. So my job really was doing an awful lot of auditing. I did enjoy it. It was working in fashion. But I realised when I set up my own business and worked for myself, that actually I could be in charge of my own learning. Each dress has its own challenge, so therefore I don't think there has been a single dress in the last 20 years where I didn't learn something, either because it was a style that I'd made before but I hadn't made it in that fabric, or vice versa, or there was a particular body shape or a particular personality type that I was working with. But all the way along I've had to learn, and I really enjoy that. I don't enjoy the prospect of my knowledge becoming stagnant. And as I've gone through my career, I've taken every opportunity to try and learn new skills. So occasionally I'll do a new course it could be something to do with marketing, could be video editing, it could be learning about pattern cutting, anything vaguely related to my job. I will do a course on it, find out more, read about it, watch videos and learn. And I've found that has been very stimulating and it's kept everything very fresh for me. The third thing that occurred to me about the role that I do is how privileged I am to be in such a niche area. And the bridal world is quite a closed world. A lot of it is unseen, it's behind closed doors, and I'm conscious that the person who comes to me to have their wedding dress made is putting a huge amount of faith in me and a lot of trust. Until you get married and you start trying on wedding dresses and you explore the whole landscape of the bridal world and the huge amount of choices available, you have no sort of point of reference. You might have been with friends when they've been trying on wedding dresses, but very often it will be your first time. And feeling that you can trust the person in the shop that you deal with when you choose your wedding dress, or the dressmaker who's going to be making your dress for you, is so important. Being on the other side and being the person who is making your dress, helping design your dress, helping bring your vision to life, that is a position of great privilege. And it makes me feel useful, which is very important in any career. To know that what I'm doing is worthwhile, that it's appreciated. And one of the things I love about it is the fact that I am a specialist in this area. Prior to this, and in many other jobs, you can end up sort of falling into a management position or an auditing role, but actually doing something creative and being a specialist in a specific area is very good for your well-being. It's very interesting and it's something that is really valued by people. I published a book this year about what to do with your old wedding dress, and in it I talked a lot about how the bridal industry works. It is just something that's very unknown. If you are getting married and you don't know how the bridal industry works, it makes quite an interesting read. It talks a lot about where dresses come from, how they're made, what the challenges of the industry are, and really about what your choices are. So that's something, again, that working in the position that I do, I had that knowledge built up over the last 20 years. and it was very rewarding to be able to share it in a book. So, what's a day in the life of a bespoke designer dressmaker like? Well, like many jobs, I imagine, 50% of it roughly is administration. It is accounts and managing my website and answering inquiries, keeping up with emails and phone calls, and just doing all of the administrative tasks that go behind running a business. And I don't resent that 50% because a lot of it for me is very client based. So when I open my emails, yes, some of them will be really boring stuff, but the majority of them will actually be brides who have got in touch with me because they've maybe found my website or my YouTube channel, they've heard of me, or they've been recommended, and they're getting in touch with their dreams, with their vision, with their ideas about how they want their dress to look. And I love those conversations. So even though that is a part of my job that's not paid, I have no qualms about having quite a long to and fro by email and maybe phone calls with a bride who's just working through what she's going to do about her dress. As I've referenced before, if you've not done it before, then many brides kind of don't know anything about fabric. They have never looked at bridal fashion, and it's very hard to know really where to start. So as a designer dressmaker, I'm slightly off the beaten track. I'm not a regular bridal boutique where you go and try on a rack of dresses from lots of different designers. So the conversation is very rounded. I can give lots of advice about fit and about choosing a style and how to buy a dress, whether to buy something that you order from a sample, which is the conventional way that most brides choose their dress, or whether you buy a sample dress or a pre-loved dress and then you take it to somebody like me to have it customized. There are a lot of choices, and I spend a lot of my day having those kind of conversations. The other 50% of my time I spend sewing and doing fittings. And I find it works for me to group my fittings so that they are one after the other in the course of a day. Similarly with sewing, I find I like to ring fence the time that I sew so I can really concentrate. When I do fittings, there's an amount of preparation. I always liaise with the bride before she comes to a fitting, so I make sure she remembers, obviously, the dress. Nobody forgets their dress, but sometimes brides can forget their shoes or their petticoat or their veil if they want to try that on, or their underwear if it's needed under the wedding dress. So there's a little bit of toing and froing to make sure they have everything they need. And during the fittings, which I love, often it's the first time I've met somebody, but I find out a little bit more about the wedding. It's a privilege to have this little window on people's lives. I very often get to meet people's family. They sometimes will come with their mum or a bridesmaid. Many of them come on their own. I find a lot of brides feel this is actually quite a private thing. Many brides find until they've actually chosen their dress, and in my case had me start to make it, then they very often don't want to bring someone with them. They would like an opinion on some of the detail of the dress, but some brides have enough confidence in their own opinion about how they want their dress to look. And sometimes multiple opinions from people on the sofa isn't always helpful and can be actually quite stressful. So sometimes people come in a group, sometimes they come on their own. Either is lovely. During fittings, usually we'll do a bit of sketching, we'll talk about ideas, and if somebody already has a dress, I will be helping fasten them into their dress, getting them into their shoes, and then planting them in front of the mirror. And that's when I get on my knees and start pinning hems and making sure the dress fits beautifully. As for sewing, I find it works for me to sew first thing in the morning. So usually once the family are all organised, I will happily sit down at my sewing machine. In fact, sometimes I get up really early and start sewing before they're even awake. I find this time is when my brain is rested, is feeling creative, and I suppose it hasn't been polluted by all the digital stuff that happens to us during the course of the day. I find keeping up with social media and being on my phone, which I have to do for some of my day, whilst I don't not enjoy it, I find it just uses a different part of my brain. And creatively, I'm much more productive if I have no distraction. So I'll very often have the radio on with some music playing. I have aspired over the years to sort of put Duolingo on and be learning a foreign language at the same time that I'm sewing, or listen to a very improving podcast. And the reality is I find that I need my concentration for sewing to make sure that what I do is right. There is no wriggle room with wedding dresses. They have to be finished on time and they have to be right. So really the concentration when it comes to sewing is quite high. And I suppose that's another consideration in terms of advising somebody over whether or not this kind of job is right for them, is are they prepared to dedicate that much concentration to a task, to a design, to creating something and ensuring it is the best they possibly can. Some people are. I love it. I find it hugely satisfying. And when I make for somebody else, I will go on and on and on and on and on until it's as good as I can get it and they are 100% happy. I mentioned social media. Social media is just part and parcel of the job. In fact, I know very few businesses that aren't partly reliant on social media, and maintaining a presence on there, yes, of course it is important. But I find the bridal business is so seasonal. Yes, people do get married all the way through the year, but typically from about February till September, I'm sewing like a demon. And the rest of the year, things quieten down a little bit and I can catch up on social media and my website and so on. So I don't resent doing social media, but I wouldn't say I'm a natural at it. And occasionally when it is really busy, I just have to let it slide. And then I just hope that the Instagram algorithms are not going to hate me. And if they do, there's nothing I can do about it. You literally can't be everywhere at the same time. About creating dresses themselves, there are two stages which are my absolute favourites. I would say the first part is the beginning stage. It's all the to and fro and the chit chat with a bride when she first engages me and we start talking about her ideas for her dress. I love that design stage. I love educating people about fabrics and choices and different styles and what's available and how things could work. I specialise in what to do with your old dress, so I really try and encourage people to bring an heirloom dress or a pre-loved dress or even an ex-sample dress. But I love being able to incorporate something from a dress from a member of their family. It just makes it really, really special. So having that conversation right at the beginning, I find is a really good way to start. And it's a way for me and the bride to get to know each other. The other part I really love is the end bit, where I can see with satisfaction a product that I've made literally from a pile of fabric. That is hugely rewarding. And being able to see the look on a bride's face when the vision has come to life and she feels absolutely beautiful. Being able to tweak a design and pin and nip and tuck and just get the hem to be exactly the perfect length, or the fit to be just right, or the sleeve to be exactly the right proportions. All of that is so rewarding when you see the look on a bride's face in the mirror when she tries on her finished dress. And it's lovely seeing the reaction of the people around her. Very often brides will bring their mum or their bridesmaids or their sister along to the bridal fitting. And quite often then people will produce something. You know, a mum might produce a little blue bow that she had on her wedding dress, and that's something that I can just stitch in at the final fitting. These moments are really special, and as much as possible I try and take photos of the bride at the fitting with her mum or with another member of the family. Just because it makes a lovely memory. I always keep the offcuts from dresses because I put them in the bag. Very often people actually love crafting. They might want to make something from it. They like scrapbooking. But very often when I point out that the scraps are in the bag, they then say, oh, I could make a scrunchie from it, or I could make a cushion, or their sort of creative imagination is sparked. And I think that's a lovely way to sort of wrap up a fitting. One last thing to consider about whether bespoke bridal design is for you and running your own business, I think, is the work-life balance. And I have a young family, and I have always found it's worked very well. I have tailored my working hours and my availability around my availability as a mum. So when my daughter was in nursery, I would do fittings. Once she got to the age where she was having a regular bedtime, I could do fittings in the evening. I would do fittings at the weekend when my husband was around and was able to look after her so that I could fully concentrate on my job. And I suppose I just pruned my work life to fit with my family life. It's very easy for it to work the other way and let work be in the driving seat. And you can very quickly, I think, find that actually family and relationship life is suffering, and you then start to resent your work life. I've been very fortunate in being able to find the right balance. So being a bespoke designer dressmaker and having done it for 20 years, I think I've seen it through the ups and downs of life, through ill health, changes in family, changes in house, we've moved house, and it's just, for me, worked beautifully. I love being in the bridal industry. I find most people are very happy. People seem to think it's stressful, but in my experience, if you do what you say you're going to do, when you say you're going to do it, then brides don't get stressed. I think if you feel you're dealing with a reasonable person, then you know you are always going to find a solution, and that's very reassuring right from the start. My mum used to be a pharmacist. She was also a hobby dressmaker, and she taught me to sew. But she loved her job, but she always said she spent her whole day talking to people who were ill and miserable and didn't want to be there. And that is probably the one thought I would leave you with in terms of my job as a bespoke designer. Every day I see brides who are happy, who want to be there, who love what I'm doing, and who are excited and hopeful and looking forward in life. And when I go and visit fashion colleges and talk to students about what it's like to live a creative life and to run a bridal business, that's one of the things I point out to them, is how vital it is to make sure you're doing something you love. If you have someone in your life who is asking your advice or trying to make some decisions about their GCSEs or their A-levels or what job to go into, and you know they're interested in fashion or in textiles, or maybe they love wedding dresses, you're very welcome to put them in touch with me or leave a comment, and I'd be very happy to offer any advice if I can. I do work with a lot of students and I mentor other designer dressmakers, so I'm very comfortable in putting in my 2 pennies worth and hopefully being able to offer some useful advice. But I hope that was fun. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.